Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel where we dive deep into big issues shaping our world today. And if you've been following the news at all, you know that the conflict in the Middle East, specifically Israel's response to the Hamas attacks in Gaza, has sparked massive protests right here in the United States. People are hitting the streets, chanting for a ceasefire, and a lot of them are zeroing in on one key demand: an end to the U.S. military aid flowing to Israel. It's a heated topic, and it feels like the conversation is shifting in ways we haven't seen before. Imagine this: folks are out there saying, if you want my money, you better listen to me, because the U.S. shells out about $3.8 billion in aid to Israel every single year. That's not pocket change, it's a huge chunk of taxpayer money, and since World War II, Israel has received more foreign aid from us than any other country on the planet. But now, there's this growing chorus from the left wing of the Democratic Party calling for more scrutiny, even threats to block President Biden's request for an additional $14.3 billion in assistance. It's like the dam is breaking on what used to be a taboo subject. Criticizing Israel publicly was once frowned upon, but today, those voices are getting louder, more insistent, and they're forcing everyone to pay attention. Let me paint the picture for you. Protests erupting in cities across the country, from New York to Los Angeles, with signs waving high, demanding not just peace but accountability for how our dollars are being spent in a war zone. And it's not just random activists, we're talking lawmakers, influencers, and everyday people who feel like the US can't keep writing blank checks without asking tough questions. The nature of the discussion is changing, and it's fascinating or maybe terrifying depending on where you stand to watch this unfold in real time. Now, let's zoom in on the current fight over conditional aid, because this is where things get really juicy. Back on January 16th, Senator Bernie Sanders stepped up and introduced a resolution that aimed to slap some conditions on that continued aid to Israel. He kept it simple, saying it's just a request for information, a modest, common-sense proposal to get a report on how U.S. aid is actually being used. Specifically, the resolution would freeze aid unless the State Department coughed up a report within 30 days, examining whether Israel has committed human rights violations in Gaza. Sanders didn't mince words. What's happening in Israel right now is being fueled significantly by U.S. military aid, including those massive 2,000-pound bombs that can wipe out entire neighborhoods. Yeah, those are American-made. It's a stark reminder that our support isn't abstract, it's tangible, deadly, and tied directly to the destruction we're seeing on our screens every day. As expected, though, the Senate shot it down overwhelmingly in a 72-11 vote. Opponents argued that we can and should push Israel toward a more targeted prosecution of the war against Hamas in Gaza, but passing this resolution wouldn't help. In fact, they'd say it's counterproductive. But Sanders fired back, asking the big question, are we complicit? And the answer, obviously, is yes, we are. That's why he brought it up, and he and other members vowed to keep fighting for accountability from Israel. Even though it failed, this moment represents a historic level of scrutiny for U.S. aid to Israel. Just the fact that the Senate had to debate this publicly shows there's a changing tide. Even if it didn't pass and was rejected big time, forcing senators to grapple with these questions out in the open signals increasing pressure to do more, to hold the line on human rights and fiscal responsibility. It's like the light music playing in the background of those old newsreels, a subtle underscore to the drama unfolding. Shifting gears a bit, let's talk historical context, because you can't understand today's fireworks without knowing how we got here. Picture this: it's 1948, an historic moment for Zionism, celebrated right in Washington at the office of the Jewish Agency for Palestine, where a small boy runs up the flag of the new Jewish state. The United States was the first country in the world to recognize Israel, with no less than Philip Jessup announcing that we recognize the provisional government as the de facto authority. But back then, there really wasn't much financial assistance attached, just a little bit of money, some loans to help resettle all the people flooding into Israel. And of course, this was right after the Holocaust, that unimaginable horror where millions suffered, reduced to numbers in Nazi camps. It was a crucial part of the context for Israel's creation, a beacon of hope amid the ashes. In the 1950s and 60s, the U.S. stepped up with economic aid to help the young nation get on its feet, building infrastructure, supporting growth. But by the early 1970s, things pivoted hard toward military assistance, especially after the Yom Kippur War in 1973, when two Soviet client states, Egypt and Syria, launched a coordinated surprise attack on Israeli forces in the Sinai and the Golan Heights. Israel fought back fiercely, repelling the attacks and regaining lost ground. But it was only possible after the U.S. decided to supply the Israeli military with the gear they needed. I remember hearing interviews from the time, like one soldier saying he's very happy with what they're getting from the United States and very thankful. In 1973, Israel was defending itself against Soviet-backed foes, which created a massive incentive for the U.S. and Israel to align more closely, turning what was a regional ally into a strategic powerhouse in the Cold War chess game. The real turning point, though, came with the Camp David Accords, signed at the White House by the leaders of Egypt, Israel, and the United States. After decades of mistrust and brutal warfare, American diplomacy finally brokered a formal peace treaty between these old adversaries. That agreement transformed the relationship, cementing a deep American security commitment to Israel. And it was in the 1970s that Israel shifted from being a somewhat partisan, mostly democratic cause to a bipartisan national issue, something both sides of the aisle could rally behind. For decades, U.S. economic aid propped up Israel's economy, helping it boom, but since the rapid expansion in the 1990s, that economic side began to phase out gradually in the 21st century. There was a mutual agreement to shift the balance after Camp David in 1979. Aid was split between economic and military, but over time it became almost entirely military assistance, reflecting Israel's growing self-sufficiency economically but ongoing security needs. Fast forward to the state of U.S. aid to Israel today, and it's a cornerstone of America's strategy in the Middle East, ensuring Israel maintains a qualitative military edge over its neighbors. This means giving them first dibs on or more advanced versions of U.S. defense technology, and when we sell weapons to Arab states or others in the region, we often have to offset that by boosting packages to Israel to keep the balance. What this translates to in practice is that when neighbors want to buy a weapon system, the U.S. frequently arranges to sell the same or better to Israel, keeping that edge sharp. Annual foreign military financing from the U.S. make up about 16% of the Israeli military budget. That's huge, a lifeline that funds everything from jets to missiles. President Biden himself has laid it out. Making sure Israel and even Ukraine succeed is vital for America's national security. History teaches us that when terrorists don't pay a price for their actions or dictators for their aggression, it leads to more chaos, death, and destruction. In Israel, we must ensure they have what they need to protect their people today and always. Last year, Biden requested that whopping $14.3 billion in additional assistance, with about $10.6 billion going straight to the Pentagon to equip Israel better. The response to the Hamas attack included ammo and interceptors to replenish the Iron Dome system, that incredible shield that's the bedrock of Israel's defense against rockets. As Biden put it, Israel and America are connected now and forever. Historically, these aid packages have sailed through Congress with little fuss because Israel enjoys solid bipartisan support. Think about it. Peace requires compromise, but we'll never ask Israel to compromise its security, and crowds applaud that sentiment every time. There's been remarkably strong backing from both parties, but in the last 5 to 10 years, cracks have appeared, especially on the Democratic side, where folks are saying maybe it needs to be qualified, conditioned in some way to align with our values. Despite the shifting mood in Congress, it's still likely that Biden's new security package will pass the Senate without too much drama. Lawmakers are clear Israel has to end the threat of Hamas, which is pure evil. If left unchecked, they'd repeat the horrors along the Gaza Strip everywhere in Israel. So we're going to support our close friend and ally, no question. The U.S. has baked this aid into its foreign policy like it's unchangeable, a fixture. I've talked to officials lately asking if there will ever be conditions. You criticize Israel's actions, so what do you say behind closed doors to hold them accountable? Would you withhold aid? And the answer comes back, no, it's not even on the table. For his part, Senator Sanders isn't backing down. He intends to keep scrutinizing this military assistance. He straight up said, "Do not count me in to give another $10 billion to a right-wing extremist government in Israel. It's just the start." But he assures there are many more senators upset about what's going on in Gaza right now, and that frustration is bubbling up, demanding real change. As we wrap this up, think about how all these threads, the protests, the resolutions, the history weave together into this complex tapestry of alliance. Aid and accountability, the U.S.-Israel bond is deep-rooted, forged in the fires of post-Holocaust rebirth and Cold War strategy, but today's voices are challenging us to evolve it, to ensure our support doesn't blind us to the human cost. Protests continue, debates rage in the halls of power, and the world watches as America grapples with its role. Will the tide turn toward conditions, or will tradition prevail? Only time will tell, but one thing's clear: the conversation has changed forever, and it's up to us to keep it going. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. If this sparked something in you, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and drop your thoughts in the comments. What's your take on U.S. aid to Israel? Let's discuss.